Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. As you'll have seen in the title, we have a guest, and we'll get to them very shortly. But before that, Magical Learning is a training and facilitation company that's been running for over 25 years and partnered with global thought leaders like Robin Sharma and John Mattone. We love learning from experts, and today we've got one on to have a bit of fun with, learn about some really interesting thinking. But before we get to all that, we've got to check in with our regular team and see what's going on. So, Al, how are you going? What's been going on this week?
Nothing too exciting, Jess. I think I've acclimatised to the weather up here where I haven't been getting out on the water much, but I've really been enjoying work and kind of slipping into a management role, which is helping me put all those skills I've been learning for many years into practice, which I'm really enjoying.
And did you want to tell us a little bit about what the management role kind of is in, Al? This is interesting.
Working for an RTO, so we train people in construction around cranes, dogging, rigging, all sorts of machine licenses. And I guess one of the things I'm quite passionate about there is helping sort of women who are coming into that industry, because that's something I've noticed, to have one sort of, woman in the class who can often be going through to be doing like advanced rigging to fly people across the stage. They have to do all the dogging and rigging courses to get there. And I see how quite challenging it is for those people to sit in a class full of construction workers.
Well, Al, we love that. And I think that that's great for today's conversation because I think we can get into some great sort of conversations around that. So great to have you on, Al, as always.
Thanks, Jess.
No worries. And today we're joined by our amazing guest, Megan Dalla-Camina. Now, Megan, how is your week going?
Hey, Jess. Hey, Alan. My week has been a bit hectic. Yeah, I kind of go between lots of different things. So I'm doing PhD research, then I'm running my company, and then I'm coaching women, and then I'm talking to clients, and I'm doing amazing podcasts. So yeah, it's always a bit of a juggle. This week's been a bit of a juggle, but it's all good, right? Like it's all things I want to be doing. So no complaints.
Well, we're glad you managed to squeeze us in because that sounds like 4 different full-time jobs. So glad to have a brief window to have you on the Magical Learning Podcast.
No, I'm so happy to. This is the fun stuff. So happy to be here.
Okay, great. Well, Megan, we're happy to have you. Now, for listeners that may not have, that may be being introduced to you for the first time here today, let me just run them through a little bit of your backstory here. So Megan Dalla-Camina is the founder and CEO of Women Rising, an award-winning leadership company that has supported thousands of women and male allies across 76 countries to build meaningful careers, grow their leadership, and create lasting impact. Following an 18-year executive career with IBM, GE, and PwC, Megan founded Women Rising to help organizations develop exceptional women leaders, engage male allies, and build more inclusive, high-performing workplace cultures. A sought-after keynote speaker, leadership expert, and PhD researcher, Megan is the author of Women Rising, a practical guide to navigating leadership and career success with confidence, courage, and authenticity. Megan's work has been featured in hundreds of media outlets globally, including Forbes, Fast Company, CNN, and Psychology Today. So very happy to have you on, Megan, and very excited to get stuck into today's conversation.
Yeah, let's go.
Now, as I mentioned before the podcast, we do have a few authors that like to listen to this, and we do have a book that we're talking about, Women Rising, The Forces That Hold Us Back, The Tools to Help Us Rise. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that book before we get into today's conversation? And if you want to tell us a little bit about why you wrote it and a bit about how you wrote it as well.
Yeah, get me started on how I write, and the writing process will be here all day long. I love talking about writing. So I wrote Women Rising to really support the dialogue that I have supporting women and also bringing men into this conversation around helping women rise, women's empowerment, gender equality, diversity inside organizations and in our society in general. So it's really looking at the forces outside of us that hold us back as women, patriarchy, and how, the systems are often not set up to help women rise, to support women. And a lot of that is hidden. It's subversive. We don't talk about it. I write about 6 paradoxes of power that really can impact women at work. And then really look at the inner critic, how women internalize the patriarchy and how that becomes that voice in our head that tells us that we can't, we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, and how that shows up for women. And then really practical tools, to go on the journey. So that's the book. Why I wrote it, because I really want women particularly, but also men acting as male allies to understand the full spectrum of what's actually going on for women. So often we have a very superficial level of understanding about why don't we have more women in management? Why don't we have women in more male-dominated sectors and careers? Why are we not seeing women in leadership? And, we talk about quotas and targets and, mentors and things like that, but we don't actually talk about the systemic issues or the very deep internal issues that come from those systemic issues that really impact women. So that's why I wrote it, so that we can really bring men into that conversation as well. And my writing process, so this was my 4th book that I've written. It was probably the hardest book that I've written because and anyone who wants to write or who is a writer, I was grappling with some really big topics in this book. The book before this was more like spiritual women's empowerment. This was really like getting into patriarchy and capitalism and structures and stuff that I'd been sort of wrangling with for probably 20 years before I sat down to write this. So yeah, I probably took about a year to write this book, sort of squeezing it into the places in between, running a business and doing other things. And I pretty much write front to back. So for anyone, some authors jump around a lot. I pretty much write the intro and then I write the book, from beginning to end. That's how I kind of make sense of what I'm writing. So yeah, happy to answer more questions about that, but that's the sort of the high level of my process.
No, that's great. That teases up really nicely.
Okay.
And I think before we get into today's conversation, because I think this is a really good spot to kind of start with, did you want to help define patriarchy for today's conversation? Because I think that's a great place to start. And when you explain it, it's really good at sort of giving us a bit of an idea of what the system looks like.
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this when I was writing this book. And I just like to break things down to the most simple sort of layer because that's how I understand them. So for me, the way I describe patriarchy is systems that were set up by men for men to succeed in. And really importantly, that's not blaming men, right? That's not saying that everything is men's fault, but does paint, I think, a really clear picture of the systems that we still today work in, that we live in, that we operate under, whether it's, in our governments, in our organizations, in society in general. We are still living, in a patriarchy. And that, the other thing that I would add to that is, and how the feminine has been suppressed through that building of systems set up by men for men to succeed in.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's a great place for us to start and give the framing for this conversation. And someone else who often likes to kind of get a framing is Danette, who's written in our first question here, so our Director of Learning. And she's written, her first question here is, what do organizations need to understand if they want their women to lead and shine?
Great question. I would love every leader to be asking that question. Let's just put that out there. I think the questions that need to be asked and the attention that needs to be given is again beyond this surface level discussion that I see. We work with more than 800 organizations around the world in many of the countries that your listeners will be in. And, really diverse industries as well. And so much of the conversation that I am privy to is it's just very surface level. It's not looking at the real issues. It's not getting into the paradoxes of power that I talk about around how we tell women to be empowered, but the systems that they operate within are actually disempowering them. How we tell women we want them to be leaders, but then when they lead, we say to them, no, don't lead like that. We want you to lead like it's always been done. We want you to lead in the traditional masculine male model of leadership. And I see that across industries, across countries, across levels in organizations. So we've got to get deeper. We need our leaders to really understand the lived experience of women at work, to be curious about that, and then to take a really good look around at how do we operate, where are the people in this situation, and we can apply this to women, but we can also apply this to any diverse group, right? Any group that is not the norm. Like, what is the lived experience of those people, and what can I do as a leader to set up the systems, the structures, the culture, and the day-to-day things that will help those people thrive?
Oh, I'm so excited to get into Alan's question just after this one, because Alan is not only a crane instructor, but also a Pilates instructor. So he's done many different types of learning. So we've got many different things to discuss there, which
I
I'm very
love that combination.
Yes, exactly. So well, we'll get to that in 1 second. I'm going to finish off Danette's questions and then we can get into a great conversation about that. So Danette's second question here was, why do organizations still feel challenges in helping their women to lead and shine?
Oh, look, I mean, there's so many challenges today, right? Like, we've got all the historic challenges just around equality and the power that I just spoke about, and the paradoxes, like all of the things that we've been fighting against for decades, collectively to try and create inclusive workplaces. And all of that really impacts women. And look, I think we just got to name the fact that, like, leaders are really busy people. Everyone who has a job is really busy. When you look at the priorities that leaders have on their plates, and we stack them up, and the pressures to deliver and, hit the numbers and do all of those things. And then we have people in general, and then we have this segment called women. And I know from being a former executive and what was on my plate, what was on my CEO's plate, like, it's just really hard, right? Like, it's really hard to give the attention that something like gender equality and building inclusive workplaces and helping women thrive takes to get beyond we'll just tick the boxes, right? So I think there's all of that. I think we are working and living in really challenging times for business, for leadership, whether it's AI, whether it's geopolitical issues, whether it's environmental issues. Like, it's just a very complex landscape. So I think when you layer that over the gender equality challenges and issues that we've been trying to, address for such a long time, it just gets really muddy really quickly. So I think attention, focus, understanding the issues. And look, let's be honest, DEI as a construct was taken off the agenda in the US a couple of years ago, and that's had a massive flow-on effect globally around where we are and where we are not prioritizing specifically on women, specifically on women's leadership, where the budgets are, where the focus and attention is from a learning perspective. Like, that's we've seen a real shift in that, and women are answering that by seeing less investment come to them and them saying, I'm out. And we're seeing that in the data that's come through in 2026. They're saying, if you're not going to invest in me, if you don't care about my career, I'm leaving. And not only are women exiting the workforce in very large numbers, we're seeing it in the US, we're seeing it in Australia, we're seeing it in China, and other places, but they're also saying, I no longer want to be a leader. I don't want to step into a leadership role because I don't think that you have demonstrated to me as a workplace that I can thrive doing that, and the cost is just too great. So, like, there's a lot of factors going on, that are impacting women thriving.
Wow. Well, that is a great summary, and there's so many factors there that you're mentioning. So much to talk about. I think let's go to Al, because I'm really interested to see how Al's connection and questions sort of relate to this. So, Al, go ahead.
Thanks, Jez. Megan, listening to you, the big thing standing out for me is the system is set up by men for men. And a good mate said to me recently, we can't fix the system, but we can influence it. And what I'm hearing you talk about is some little things that we can do. And I guess I'm looking at it from the male perspective of, as you mentioned, male allies, like how can sort of males help? And even, I guess my specific question was, how can women shift their focus from external validation to that internal authority? But I'm also thinking of the male who's going to disrupt the system and get that external, no, we want it the same way it always was. how can we all tap into that inner authority?
Oh, so many good thoughts and questions in that, Al. See, we're best friends now. I just call you Al, not even Alan. It's just Al. So let's pull that apart a little bit. So the first piece that you mentioned was around male allies, right? And I'm so happy you asked this, because this is one of the breakthrough pieces to this entire discussion. And we do work with like it's called the Male Allies Program that we do at Women Rising, specifically for this reason, because for so long, women at work has been women talking to women about women. Right. And, it's women's problem to fix. They'll go do the unpromotable work. And, the men will be over here being good guys, but not being true active male allies. So one of the keys that is going to unlock all of this is men moving from being good guys with good intentions to really understanding how to be active advocates for women, and how that shows up in everyday actions in the workplace, right? So it's understanding the lived experience of women. It's understanding gender bias at work and what we teach, the 6 specific types of gender bias that exist. It is knowing, like, what is your role? If you're in a meeting or a training session, or you're doing something and a woman's being constantly interrupted, what's your role as a male ally to step in, use your voice, use your privilege, use your power? So, that whole piece for men, and men being included as part of the solution, not just being looked at as the problem, is incredibly important, because there's a lot of men out there, and we see it in the data, we see it in workplaces that we work with and speak to, and data that came out that said like 78% of men want to be part of a solution to creating more inclusiveness at work. But since the Me Too movement, 60% of male managers specifically are just scared of doing the wrong thing. They feel like they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't have the tools. They don't have the understanding. And they're like, just kind of stepping back because they don't want to, either just upset people or do the wrong thing. So what we love to see in the work that we do is when men feel like included, that they can be part of the discussion, part of the solution, and get the support that they need so that they can make this shift from good guy to male ally. So that was the first question. That was the first part of your question. Any thoughts on that? Just before we talk about inner authority.
I guess what I'm hearing there, Megan, and I agree, is, and I guess I'm one of those guys who does want to make change, but I'm scared to do the wrong thing. And I guess that's sort of where I'm leading to, with that inner authority of how do I stand up, try things, make the mistakes, and know that I'm having a go. I'm trying to disrupt the system, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and like I really like honor that, because I think there's so much goodwill and good intention out there. I think that for men to get in authority, men need to get educated, right? So there needs to be that work, and I wrote a whole chapter in Women Rising called "What About the Men?" for the men. So for men to read, to understand, the system, the situations, the lived experience for women, and specifically what is your role, and to just break it down to be as simple as possible so that it can be put into action. So I think that for men, just get educated, whatever it is, whether it's reading Women Rising, doing the Male Allies program, free resources, go use AI and put into chat, what are 5 things I can do this week to be a better male ally for women at work? Just, get educated. That will really help build that sense of authority that you now know what to look for. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you'll have some tangible things that you can actually put into practice.
Again, you mentioned how something about men understanding what it's like for women. Somebody that I really respect said to me once that unless I'm in a country where I'm the only white male, I'll never understand what it's like for women. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same where there's any form of difference, right? Like it's like me as a white woman being able to understand the experience for a black woman who's sitting next to me. Like I can never understand her experience. You know, like I can't. I don't have any of the, other than the gender lens, which is only one part of it. I don't have all of the challenges and biases and prejudices and roadblocks that she has had that I don't have. I can listen. I can try and understand her lived experience. I can educate myself, all of these things, but I can't, like I haven't lived it, and I think it's very similar, to when we look at, you're never going to understand the woman's experience, but you can listen to the lived experience. You can educate yourself on what those systemic barriers are. And then you can look, just like I try and be an ally for women of color. You can look at, okay, what are the tools in my toolkit from my power and privilege as a white man that can go and help people who don't have that power and privilege? So yeah, I do. It's often interesting, just the piece about being the only white man in the room. When I find myself in a room of women and there is one white man in the room, and just how uncomfortable that can be. But yeah, I mean, it's just a fact. And I would just always just be curious. I think curiosity, when we're looking at any form of difference, is our best friend, right? Just be curious about, what is this like for you? What does it feel like for you? How can I be a better ally for you? I think are great curious questions.
That's, really stands out for me as curious. And that as men, it's our responsibility to get curious and actually learn, which led me to the last
Yes.
part there, Megan, on how can women and men shift their focus from that external validation to that inner authority?
Yeah. I love this question. And so much of the work that we do is about coming to that place of inner authority. And particularly for women, right? Like particularly because obviously the core of my work in the world is about helping women rise, whatever that means to them. So number one, understanding the systems that we live and work in is really important, because we're not living and working in a bubble. And so often I think we think that we are, or that's how we've been conditioned, that it's just all about us. And so therefore anything that happens to us or that we experience is our fault. And that's just not true, right? We are a system of our environment. So I think that's the first thing about understanding your inner authority. Understanding your inner authority is understanding how that has been shaped by the system, whether that's patriarchy, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. Whether it's just your family of origin or your culture, like how have you been crafted? And then we come and we do that internal work. Like, how do I come into my own inner authority? And the work that we do with women is so much about, number one, finding clarity. What is it that you want? Whether that's your life vision, whether it's where you find meaning, whether it's what your purpose is, whether it's what your values and your strengths are, what your goals are in your career, how are you feeling around your well-being? Like, let's just get some focus and clarity around you. Because so much of our attention and focus is external, particularly as women. Around taking care of, nurturing, doing all of those things for other people. Bring it back to you. And another big part of the inner authority, and it's not that men don't have it, but women have it in droves, is this internalized patriarchal voice, which shows up as what I call the inner critic. And that inner critic voice, that is, if you speak to most women, they will tell you all of the stories they constantly tell themselves about why they can, why they can't, what they should, what they shouldn't. Yeah, all of that. And to really come from a place of inner authority, we have to be able to sort of wrestle with and tame and quieten down through understanding what that inner critic voice and story, what those stories are, so that we can claim that inner authority. And I've heard a lot of men talk about the same thing as well. So I think different context, but similar experience.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Megan. Yeah, lots of great points I've taken down there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al, and great questions. Megan, I was going to say this actually made me think of something, and I wanted to get maybe your thoughts on this, because I think something that's really amazing about what you do is that it seems like one of the things that you are really good at is sort of being a different mirror than people may have seen themselves in before, in the sense that when people are talking to you, how you reflect back at them, what they're telling you it seems different, and that inner critic is kind of maybe what you would expect to hear back. Maybe it's whatever that's going to be, but you take people and you go, no, these aren't bad things, these are positive things, and it's just the system that we're in has just said that they're bad, but actually it's a positive attribute. So I was going to ask, does that resonate with you at all? And if so, how do you do that? How are you able to sort of, I guess, see through this like cloud of illusion and just see something a bit more, I guess, more real, I suppose?
Oh, I love that. I love that framing. That's so beautiful. No one's ever asked me that before. I think that the way that I work and think is, I'm just always looking for, like, what's the way through? Do you know what I mean? Like, where's the opening? And I think so much of if we just take the gender conversation, so much of that conversation for such a long time has been militant and combative and blame and shame and divisive. And I think at a point in time that was really useful, right? Like at the start of the women's movement, that's exactly what it needed to be. What I found over decades, particularly in the workplace, is that at some point that stopped serving us. And that's when I started looking for, okay, what's the conversation we're not having here? As I sat in executive roles around boardroom tables with some of the most senior male CEOs in the country, and would listen to this surface level conversation and we're going to find the silver bullet to gender and da-da-da-da-da. And it was nowhere in sight, right? And we're decades later and we're still here. So it kind of lifted a veil for me of, you guys are talking about the same thing we've been talking about for a decade. And now we're 16 years later and we're still talking about the same thing. So my way is always lift the veil. What conversation aren't we having? And where's the truth? Where is a truth? So many truths. Where is a truth that we're not telling? And that's when I really started talking about patriarchy in organizations where everyone would lower their eyes and shuffle in their seats and look around the room, right? Because, we don't talk about that here. Well, let's talk about it, and let's find a way to talk about it that brings in the men, that makes them feel like, well, I could be part of this as well. And that's kind of empowering for everybody. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I'm just always trying to find where's the opening, what's the way through, what aren't we talking about, and how do we do it in a way that brings everybody in, versus us and them putting people on the outside, because I think certainly for where we need to go, that's not going to get us there.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a very, it's something that I definitely agree with in terms of having a bit more of an inclusive mindset in terms of what I have outcomes for. There's other ways that people can contribute that I'm not even thinking about that can build it. So no, I love that. But that actually kind of leads into the question that I had here, because, I've always loved the resilience of women who are overlooked and then come back and not only reach that level, but then go above that level. Because I think often I see just women are just constantly building resilience, honestly. And then so when tough times hit, they're often ready to go. I'm sure there's many stories, but are there any stories that come to mind when you think of women who succeeded despite the odds and barriers that are put in their way?
Yeah, look, I mean, I see it every single day,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's two things here. One is when you look at the science of resilience, resilience isn't about endurance. Resilience is about renewal. And it's something that I teach, right, in our Women Rising program, because women are so resilient. But they're often resilient because they've just pushed and driven and strived and been on the treadmill and just pushed through whilst taking care of everybody and everything, right? And then when you start to turn that lens and talk about renewal, well, how do you restore yourself and how's your well-being? And yeah, it's like, what are you talking about? Which is why we see such epidemic levels of burnout amongst women, all different types of burnout. So, like, I always like to say that because I think it's not about how hard you can push through. It's about how do you renew yourself every day, all the way through. That's how you build the resilience. And I think to your question, I mean, there's so many stories, but I think the thread is every woman, arguably, I would argue, because I see it, in the women that I teach and coach, would have a story to tell you about where they were overlooked, where they were silenced, where they were shut down, where they were excluded, where there was a barrier put in place or an invisible barrier that they didn't know was there until they start doing this work, but that they either push through or they overcome just through sheer determination, right? And persistence. So, yeah, I think, and it's not to say that men or other genders don't, of course, they also, overcome and do all of these things. But my work's around women. So, yeah, I would say every woman you speak to, ask her about that and you'll hear a different story. Because it's just still to this day, it's still everywhere. And then go speak to women of color, and they will tell you like the next level of the barriers and the stories and how they've overcome. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm really liking about this conversation is how much it comes from, at least in my opinion, it's coming from a broader perspective of what potential can be. Like, it's not this role is your potential. It's let's see what you can kind of bring to the thing, which I really like. That's good for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are.
Yes.
That's what you can unlock. And I think that's a great mission. I want to grab some of the other questions here because we've got some really good ones. So Marg has written in, what are some tips/habits you have for parents to pass on to their young daughters as they grow up?
I love this question. So here's what we see, right, around young girls. Young girls don't have a problem. Young girls don't have a problem with confidence, with using their voice, with pushing boys over in the playground, with getting in and getting into the sports. Like, young girls don't have a problem. Where we get the problem is teenage. Once we get into that adolescent age, that's when girls' confidence goes all the way down. So the first thing that I would say is, and I say this to women that are in our program because they're always saying, can you please do a program for girls? And I say, well, maybe, but don't know when, but maybe. There's lots of great people out there doing great work for girls. The best thing that you can do for your daughters is do your own inner work. Do your own work. Understand your inner critic. Understand how you've internalized patriarchy. Understand your confidence. Be really tuned into, what do you verbalize? How do you talk about yourself? How do you talk about men? How do you talk about other women? Like, what are the conversations that are going on? How do you talk to your daughter? Right? Like, how do you talk to her about who she is and how strong she is and how capable she is and how she can do anything, and then back that up with action? So, like, it starts with us. It absolutely starts with us. I think, the power of encouragement for all of our kids and helping them with Carol Dweck's work around growth mindset. If you're going to read one book as a parent, there's many, but go read Carol Dweck's Mindset, and go read Dr. Shafali's work as well. But yeah, like we have to do so many of the challenges that come for girls come in adolescence. So like that's when we've really got to pay attention to, and social media has just made this so hard, right? So hard, not just for girls, well, for all genders and for boys as well. And, if you've got boys and girls at home, or you've got mixed gender kids, especially boys and girls, what are the conversations you're having with your boys? What's happening with your sons? Right? Pay attention to that, because a lot of the confidence issues that girls have in adolescence is because of boys. Yes, it's social pressure from girls and societal messages and all of that, but watch what's happening with your sons and your daughters. Really important.
Definitely. And I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with either of these, but I do know that the YouTube algorithm can really push you to conservative stuff very quickly if you're not careful. So it is important to be aware of that, I think. And I think that's a great sort of point to talk about with the sons there as well. Just because I know that if you set up just from my own experience working with YouTube, that's my own background knowledge.
This is so important what you just said, right? It's so important what you just said. There is this cultural backlash and divide that is happening on both sides of this equation, particularly if you're in the US right now, as I know many of your listeners are. The messages that are being fed to our sons, and I've got a son, a single mother, I've got a 25-year-old, amazing man, who is incredible, but the messages, and he teaches boys. So like we're right in this conversation. The messages that are being fed to our boys and the socialization of our boys is horrifying. Take the politics out of it, right? So yeah, that's really important what you just said.
Yeah. And it's just a good bias to be naturally aware of that is on the internet. So good one to be aware of. I wanted to just jump into maybe a last question here. We'll have to have you back. We haven't got to all the questions, but we'll have to have you back. It's always good to chat about this stuff. I might jump into Kanika's question. So Kanika's asked, in the case of people maybe starting a new job, what are some red and green flags you'd look for in culture?
Oh, I like that question too. Red and green flags. So green flags, how do people treat each other? Like, how do people speak to each other? And I'm super conscious of this because I've got a small team, in our learning business, and we just brought a new person in, and had someone leave. And the thing that the person left, who was leaving for personal family reasons, said was like the way everybody just speaks to each other and treats each other and respects each other and helps each other, like, is such a green flag, right? So I think that's a huge green flag to really watch out for, and to watch out for in the interview process as well, right? Like, how does the person interviewing you or the people interviewing, how do they talk about other people in the business? How do they talk about the business? How do they talk about people leaving the business? Yeah, just like language, symbols, all of that stuff is both a green flag and a red flag. And so much of starting a new job is about people. It's about building relationships. So I'd be looking for both sides of that equation. Yeah, the red and the green.
I think that's a great easy one, is just what language are they using, and then that's going to split it. So that's great. Well, I mean, we've just sort of scratched the surface of this topic, but I did want to grab some final thoughts before we go into some places where people can read more about this. So I might start with you, Al. Did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
Thank you so much, Megan. I've got so many things jotted down here. I really love that the language and the words we use, again, with our daughters, with our sons. We can't change the whole system, but we are a part of that system and we can influence that part. And I really loved your words on what is the way through and what is the opening here that brings us all together.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, and great to see you again, Al, and great questions today. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Jez.
Oh, sorry. That's all right. No worries. Megan, I was going to say I had so many notes here, but I think what really comes through beyond all the sort of specifics is just how I don't know if calming is the right word, but there's a sort of grounded nature to what you are sort of putting out there that feels very much like something that we can all strive towards. And it's being framed in an area that, where's the area that needs the most help, women. But I think that what you're saying is really a beautiful vision for everybody. So I think that that's been my biggest takeaway. Did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation, Megan?
Oh, I just love it. And thank you. I really received that, what you just said. It's what I strive in my whole life for, is calmness and groundedness, which is not always easy. So, so thank you. Thank you for saying that. No, I just think this has just been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to just bring some of these thoughts and ideas and work into the dialogue. So yeah, thank you so much.
Well, no worries. I'm sure, like us, our listeners and viewers are going to have more questions, or maybe want to read the book and sort of have a little bit more of a research. So did you want to tell people the best place to reach out to you and to get the book?
Yeah, so Women Rising, the book, it's everywhere. It's on audiobook. It's on all the online retailers, paperback, ebook. If you want to learn more about Women Rising, womenrisingco.com is where we hang out over there for all the women's development, male allies work. And I'm at Megan Dalla-Camina on Instagram is pretty much where I hang out, or LinkedIn. So yeah, we'd love to connect with listeners and see what they think as they listen to all of this.
Absolutely. And look, we thank you for fitting us into what is a very hectic schedule. So appreciate that. And we definitely encourage people to go check out the book and reach out to you where possible. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Al. Great questions. Megan, great responses. And to everybody from the team who wrote in, thank you so much. To all our listeners and viewers, thank you so much. We're now over 22,000 subscribers on YouTube and over 300 episodes. So go check out the backlog over there. Otherwise, everybody, as always, have a magical week.